Thank you, Mikael, for inviting me to this session. I've been here as a guest many times, and this is the first time I can have the opportunity to speak and tell what we are doing at Mälardalens University. So I'm Nygren. I'm working at one of the 6 research areas or research and education areas called IPR over there. It stands for Innovation and Product Realization, and it's about 70 to 80 people working on the field of like innovation and design and the way of getting good things out to the markets. And innovation is the part I work in, and we are 25 people focusing on those challenges like with the innovation agenda as our main research topic. And this is some kind of examples of what that group is doing. We also have these examples. We work with that kind of things. And we also now meet together with a handful of people has during, let's say 5 years, 3, 4, 5 years, starting to work on these areas. Services and business models. And the concept like of value. How to create and develop value in a different way than we maybe usually are used to. But today I would like to go into now to talk a little bit of what is service logic, and also how can business models be used and in that sense. I will do some general introduction, and then I have a case of a research study which I've taken part in. So let me start with an example I was exposed to a couple of weeks ago, together with at least a couple of people in the audience. So I've stolen this with pride and improved. And I would like to ask you, can you name any global service brands which you are like coming in contact with daily? Global service brands. Do you have an example here?
I was thinking about Nespresso.
Nespresso, yeah. That's a good idea. Nestlé Nespresso. Another example. Credit cards, yeah. That's a very good example as well. I have a list here of really big global service brands. Also another list. Credit cards are there. And I would like to ask you, what do these brands and companies, what do they have in common? Can you see something which they have in common? Silicon Valley, I say, yes, that's a really good answer, because these are USA companies, mainly, based in the United States. So somehow these huge global service brands now has somehow like a stemming from United States. And you might wonder, why is it like that? Yes, maybe they are good to create really good service experiences, and also maybe engineer and scale this value proposition, using like the service logic and scaling that kind of experiences. So, are like the traditional goods companies, produktföretag in Swedish, are they from the rest of the world only? Well, this is some kind of a challenge or something. Think of this today and see if we can do something about it. Let me continue with an example I ran into a few years ago. It's the former CEO of Sony Ericsson who said this many years ago about products or services. Many of you maybe have been in contact with Ericsson, and this was like Sony Ericsson, the part where they had their handset manufacturing business together. And Mats Lindhoff here, he told once in a quote that when Sony Ericsson sold a phone, they said that, okay, we sold a phone and bye-bye, see you in a few years when you maybe are getting back to us and buying a new phone. That was the logic then. And then something happened in 2007, I think it was. Another company came in from like the internet mafia in North America. Apple came in and said, we sold a phone, and welcome, let's continue our relation with your phone, with the music store, with apps, with movies, with news, with everything, using the hardware of an iPhone as a platform for doing a lot more businesses while you are using your phone until the next upgrade. And this was a huge change in mindset between the companies. And we all know about the development since then. So let's then come to some kind of a starting point. What is this service logic about then? I have 3 bullet points here. It said everything is a service, value creating processes, and co-creation. And this everything is a service. Maybe that will upset some people, but let's think of the difference between like coffee or having a coffee or a cafe. You somehow, as our friends from Luleå, also very much into functional products. It's the function and not the product you're after. It's a service which something is doing, what you is after. So maybe we could see everything as a service, and see the goods, the products that only as like frozen services or vehicles for letting us use the service. Value creating processes is about when do the value occur. I will get my coffee cup here for an illustration. When the coffee is in like a 500 gram package, is that the value of the coffee, or is the value now when we all are drinking a coffee? The logic of value creating processes is everything, all the value takes place when we are like having the coffee, not before, not after, while we are having the coffee. And the last bullet point, co-creation, it's about that the customers or the users are much more involved in producing or experience the service than before. And there is like a very, very many times told example. Maybe you've heard it, but I take it anyway. It's about IKEA, the Swedish company IKEA, where you come to an IKEA warehouse. You park like 1 kilometer from the house or in these huge parking lots. You go in there and you walk for many, many hours in IKEA, and you have a lot of experiences. You can eat, you can relax, you can put in your children in the kindergarten, and then you shop. And you have these trolleys, you drag down heavy, heavy furniture. You go out, you pay, you go to the car, you put in the furniture, you go home, and then you spend 2 days assembling the furniture. So you're doing a lot of work together with like the IKEA brand to like co-create together. So it like the flat packages and the enormous amount of work that you as a customer are doing, which like maybe is the success of IKEA. So 3 examples of like a starting point to this service logic concept. And so we're coming to some kind of, there's like 2 different views of value. We have this output value that the producer, the company, that we see like the value is what comes out from a company. That's the measurement of the value. And that's like the goods logic, or like the in Swedish, produktlogik. And then we have the other view, where you see the value is like the input to the customer. You can see that everything, instead of like having this perspective of the producer, you take the perspective of that we should be by the customer side and see that what gets in, what we do, which comes into the customer, that is like the perspective of value which we should have. and that you can sometimes notion as like a service logic concept. And yesterday, me and my colleague Eric, who is here in the audience, we discussed a thing which comes in the next slide. So it's a shift of focus, like value exchange to value in use. The value doesn't occur when you're selling the 500 gram or package of coffee. The value occurs when you're drinking the coffee. The value is in the use of things. And I'm getting to our example later, Eric. So maybe this very, very old classic business model, or like model of thinking, the value chain, is a challenge. Yeah, a little bit challenge. It's so this is like the model of Michael Porter, who like in the middle of the 80s developed this or presented this model, and I think it's like a model of making some kind of squares in a company, where you have what is going on. You have what is going on in the company here, like the primary or direct activities, direct costs. Over here you have the overhead costs, indirect costs, and you have some kind of a margin or a profit over here. Everything is like the cost for the customer, like the cost-based price setting. So this kind of model is challenge, I think many people would say now. A model developed with like mental models in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. And something else is happening and needed. And now I come to our example, Eric. This is like a proposition logic, en erbjudande logik in Swedish. Let's say you are throwing arrows at the target. So let's say you are a company standing here. You have a distance to your customer, and you are trying to hit the bullseye. And you are training, and you are really practicing in understanding the customer, in being very good at your operations, and you are throwing and throwing and throwing. Sometimes you hit in the middle, like bullseye, or in shooting 10 points, and sometimes you are missing. You maybe got an 8 or 9. Sometimes you get like only 3 points. But you're standing here and really trying to understand the customers and be very good at what you're doing. But you don't really hit in the middle every time. Could service logic be about that? You change the game totally. Why do you need to stand here by the line? Well, silly rules. You just cross the line. You walk up to the customer and stand this close to the target. And there you are looking and starting to talk to the customer. Not only talking, but really engaging with the customers when you are really doing, not only like delivering things. You're really engaged with the customer and trying to understand every day what the customer needs. And also that you experience that the 10 points is not only 10 points. When you're getting closer, you see in the really middle you have 1,000 points. So that my idea is to illustrate that with the service logic also you can develop much more value than in the traditional logic. And suddenly you have 1,000 points to share in the system. This is the first time I'm testing this model, so please give me feedback later if you understood anything. So let's then go into some business model discussions, and which like the second part of this talk. And I'm starting with a graph like this, and this graph is about this, that this one you see here, it's the Nasdaq index, the stock exchange Nasdaq from like in the middle of the 80s until 2010. And you can imagine here, it was around 2000 when the big IT boom and .com boom occurred. I was working in the company here then, an IT company. It was an extremely interesting experience. And then we had the crash, and it goes up again. And here we had like the finance crisis in 2007, 2008. And this index, the blue one, it's the index of scientific journals with the name business model in the heading. And I think this is extremely interesting, that when the Nasdaq index or like goes up like this, then the business model interest goes up. And then we had some jumping here, and then when like the Nasdaq or the stock exchange goes up again, the business model index, business model research goes up. And now that graph is going even higher up. So yeah, the IT boom came there, and like around here, a big interest for business model research was around e-commerce businesses, and this new thing that how can you make money on that, and what should you actually, how can people pay like billions of Swedish kronor for just only a few hundred people? Yet to understand that and maybe motivate that could be reason why this business model concept grows so much. A few years later, the business model research became like more dealing with general business, not only the IT business. And now my idea behind this is when this business model interest now goes even higher, it's because we are like in the same situation as here. We have some kind of digitalization again, that we have Internet of Things, we have a huge shift in many things. And now again, we are everywhere interested to understand how can we create value in this new system when the old value chain model is challenged. And as some kind of a curiosity, according to this article, maybe the first time the business model was mentioned was in 1957 in a journal article in the scientific community. That's a little bit of history about business model research. But let me then just give a few examples of like maybe classical business models. We have these three. I will not go into deep in all of them, but value chain, mentioned, bricks and clicks, and disintermediation. Disintermediation means, for example, what Dell Computer did when they became a success. They cut out the middleman. Like from ordering a computer to when you got it, you have no warehouse in the middle. You just clicked on a delivery, and the computer was started to be manufactured then. You have to clean out the middleman and cut costs there. That's the disintermediation model. Another other examples is, actually product to service, and kind of a service logic as a business model, leasing and subscription. And finally, maybe some models which are more familiar now. The one called cell phone razor blade model. That's maybe someone we all have been exposed to nowadays. For example, when you buy a razor and razor blade, you buy it as a very cheap package bundled in the beginning, and then when you're going to fill up that razor blade, the next part of razor blades is much more expensive than you maybe experienced. You probably have been in contact with the same when you are going to top up your ink cartridges, bläckstråleskrivarpatroner, it's the same. And when you are now, as in your example, using your Nestlé coffee pods, they cost more than you maybe experienced. I made a calculation a couple of weeks ago comparing my own coffee consumption. If you have a regular brewed coffee, I got to like 1.20 per cup. With the Nestlé pod, it's about 360 to 440. So it may be 3-4 times more expensive than when you're brewing. And the last one down there, the freemium model, maybe the most discussed model nowadays, that you, on the internet, you download an application and you get the software for free. I'm trying to use it and test it. If you bought premium or more services, you need to pay for it. Spotify, a lot of the apps on App Store and so on. But also one of the most discussed models, does it really work? Does it really work in the long term? But the reason it's there is because the companies are fighting for our attention. And if we wanted to get our attention, and we should also pay for it, then it wouldn't work. It just need to be free first. So, and also getting to maybe definition of business models. This is one of the classical definitions from Thies, and you can say that it's about discussing of value, and it's about create the value, capture value, and deliver value. But my also notion of this, or thinking of this, that when you come to a service logic view, sometimes when I've discussed with companies within automation region and doing workshops, I've asked the companies to stop using the word deliver. And when you like, for example, in IT companies, tell them, please don't use the word deliver anymore, then really, really interesting things happens. Because in a service, or in an IT consultancy company, my experience from is that many of those companies try to squeeze in their business models in a product logic way. They productify their businesses. And that's an extremely interesting workaround, I think, that they are in an extremely service-based environment. And then they, just to understand what they are doing and get the customers to understand what they're doing, they are squeezing in their actions in like a product logic, even though they don't have any products. So to get them out of there, we told them, stop using the word deliver. And then things start to happen. So, getting closer to the end of my presentation, I would like to finish it with some examples of a research project which me and my colleague Eric here has been part of, and it's service innovation management in global industrial companies called SimGIC. And it was a research project we did we finished last year. And the focus was servitization. And servitization is like the idea from going from a product logic way of working to a service logic, and the challenges to do that. And we wanted to see how these companies could improve their service innovation and build leadership and thinking about this area. And some context was that these companies were heavily focused on a traditional R&D thinking to generate the next technological success. Large Swedish industrial companies who for 100 years has lived on their fantastic technological possibilities. They were premium suppliers, like with a very, very good reputation with the customers. The customers knew that when they got things from these companies, they got really, really good quality. And they really wanted to pay for that as well, because of being in the business for a very, very long time. But some challenges started to occur. They became under pressure from other competitors, came from below, from the side, from above, to pressure their businesses. And a challenge was like to maintain the same profitability as before, these high margins. And okay, could a solution be a service strategy, focus on servitization and develop and think of new business models? Maybe. So I will zoom into this picture in a second, so don't try to read it. But these are one example how we try to identify barriers for this shift from product logic to service logic, identify enablers, and also look at it through like cognitive factors, relational factors, and organizational factors. And let me give like a couple of examples of each area. For example, in the cognitive factors, a barrier was this technology and product mindset. That the mental models in the companies were so heavily focused on that we are doing products. You need to, if you drop them on your feet, it will hurt. That is what we are doing. And the models of developing those things were also not very suitable for services. But an enabling factor over there was training and use of Canvas. And the Canvas is the business model Canvas by Osterwalder and Pigneur, which maybe is the most used model right now for developing business model. And that was an extremely good pedagogical tool to develop the first ideas and so to spread this idea of starting to doing something else. A very good pedagogical tool. Moving forward to organizational factors. One really important thing on the barrier side was that the service sales competence in Salesforce was not very good. Or it was a challenge. That if you have motivation systems and competence in the Salesforce to selling products, going to a service selling area and service contracts was a huge challenge. Because maybe the risk taking is much higher if you are going to guarantee that the services will be up compared to like the traditional product or goods logic contracts. Enabling factors over there, which I really liked, was this entrepreneurship and space for experimentation, or skunk work. That there was room in the organizations for actually flying under the radar, having protectors and guards over that. Okay, this is important. You can do this kind of service development. We will support this, but maybe some other layers or some other people won't like this. But anyhow, work on this. It's so important, so we will protect you. Skunk work. And finally, relational factors. On the barrier side, we have the service payment acceptance of customers. That customers who were used to getting services for free because they had paid a lot of money up front, they thought. That was a barrier. To educate the customers that, yeah, with these new services you will get so much more, but you actually need to start pay for them as well. And on the enabling factor, the strong or long-term customer relations, for example, which could be used to slowly start to educate and work with the customer to change to another way of paying. So, coming up now to the last maybe conclusion here, some observation from outside, is that I have a bad habit of watching keynote speeches from these kind of companies like Apple and Google, just to understand what is going on in those companies. And by the way, tomorrow at 8 o'clock in Sweden, there is one Apple keynote. But this is from the last Google keynote, where I experienced maybe a shift in communication. This was on this Google keynote session I/O 2016, and they presented the Google Assistant like in a more heavy way. And Google Assistant is like the Siri in the Apple or the Cortana in Microsoft. It's like an assistant you communicate with, and it's like heavily based on AI technology and so on. And for the first time, I experienced that a company didn't present products on this kind of session. It was a Google Assistant who was in the center. And then they build products around it. This Google Home, which is like the Amazon loudspeaker that was presented 1 year ago, that you put a loudspeaker on your kitchen table and you start to communicate it with it. What's the weather? What's the latest news? Can you order me a taxi? Please do this and that. You have a product who are based on Google Assistant. And also Google presented their new phones, Google Pixels, which is like the main theme with that phone is that it's like built around the Google Assistant. So trying to quote their new CEO, they said something like that. We are now introducing Google Assistant, and around that we are building hardware. So it was not a product that was in the center for the presentation. It was a service. And around that, we build hardware, we build products to support that. And that is, I think, a thoughtful change in mindset, I think. And it raises some questions which I would like to investigate further. How value is created, how we can share value in the network, and what kind of tools can support this. And maybe the last bullet points. How can this goods logic and product and service logic be used in parallel? Because if you try to change everything at once, it will be a lot of resistance. So this is my final slide with some questions. I think we will get good answers in the next presentations. So thank you.
Thank you, Christer.